This is the greatest nation in history, and certainly our country's path to democracy has had its struggles. Minorities and women had to fight for years to have their voting privileges, and that's the constitutional right that is the subject of this hearing today. And we should note that this is the first time this subcommittee has convened outside of Washington, D.C. And it's appropriate that we meet here in Florida, a state that showed the world how important it is to ensure everyone's right to vote and to have that vote counted. And yet now, it's a state, our state, that only recently passed a new law that might jeopardize that right to vote. Well, Florida is not alone. Legislatures in more than a dozen states where political extremists have seized control have passed laws that place controversial and unnecessary hurdles between the voting booth and our citizens, especially young voters, seniors, and minorities. In fact, these new laws could make it harder for more than 5 million eligible voters in our state to cast their ballot in this year's presidential election. As unbelievable as that seems, and according to a widely respected Brennan Center for Justice at New York University, which recently completed the first comprehensive study of new laws, that's exactly what they say. So today we're here to examine, among other things, how one of these election laws made its way through the Florida legislature and was quickly signed into law by the governor, despite a widespread public outcry. What does this law do? It reduces the number of early voting days, including canceling the Sunday right before the Tuesday election. It also makes voting harder for people who have recently moved to another county and have an address change, like college students. And it subjects voter registration groups to penalties and fines for mistakes up to a $1,000 fine. It's so burdensome that the League of Women Voters was forced to abandon its registration drives in Florida after decades and decades of registering voters. The Miami Herald has called passage of this law part of a disturbing trend. The Orlando Sentinel has said the law amounts to weakening democracy. Florida Today called it an assault on the most cherished of American rights. I certainly agree, and it's why I ask for this hearing to be in our state. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and Senator Leahy for the Judiciary Committee's interest, and I want to commend you for conducting this investigation and for looking beyond partisan political differences to protect the rights of every citizen. Our goal is and should always be to ensure that citizens have every means of exercising the power that the Constitution says belongs to them. It's a privilege all Americans have demanded throughout the history of our nation, the right to vote. Back in 1872, after being arrested for casting what was then an illegal vote in a presidential election, Susan B. Anthony called it a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they were denied the use of the only means of securing those blessings, the ballot. That's a quote from Susan B. Anthony. And nearly 100 years after that, our country still has had in place poll taxes and literacy tests aimed at blocking African Americans from voting. And then Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. warned us back then that all types of conniving methods could be used to keep people from becoming registered voters. The civil rights leader said, The denial of this sacred right is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic traditions. It is democracy turned upside down. That's what Dr. King said. So, with a healthy dose of skepticism, let's consider what has happened to voting rights in our country over the past year. Let us try to determine whether some new conniving methods are being used to deny some Americans the only means of securing the blessings of liberty, and that is the means of the ballot and the free access to that ballot, the right to vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.